Hey everybody, we're doing another install video today. Today we are working on an over-the-knuckle steering system for the 2007 to 2018 Jeep Wrangler, the JK. So what we're going to be doing today is replacing all this rusty, old, worn-out steering stuff with all this awesome, shiny, new, heavy-duty steering stuff. So the benefits of this new system are, first of all, it replaces everything. It replaces your entire steering system. All the tie rod ends and everything are going to be brand new. The biggest benefit is a huge increase in ground clearance. This raises the tie rod over the knuckle. It just gets you a huge increase in ground clearance, keeps it up away from the rocks. So it's also an extremely heavy duty tie rod, so if you ever do brush against a rock, you're probably not going to be able to bend this thing. It's made out of 1 3/8 1045 steel. We raise the drag link over the knuckle. So that means you're going to have a flatter drag link angle. So instead of your drag link sitting at an angle in your Jeep, it's going to sit in there nice and flat, which means when you hit a bump, it just keeps things more stable. You get less bump steer. We also raise the track bar to match. That raises the roll center of the Jeep, which is a good thing. The roll center is actually the pivot point on which your suspension pivots. So by raising the roll center, what it's going to do is keep it more stable in corners. You're going to have less body roll. So we'll give you a track bar bracket, a steering stabilizer bracket. We relocate your sway bar links a little bit higher. The kit does require 3-inch bump stop spacers. Those are sold separately. Another nice feature of this kit is that it's completely bolt-on. You don't need to drill anything, you don't need to ream anything. You could even return your Jeep back to stock steering if you ever wanted to. Not that you ever would. So Jeep was kind enough to leave some nice sharp corners on the bottom of the cross member here, and I'm the kind of guy who likes to hit his head all the time. So I'm going to round these off a little bit for when I hit my head on them. We've taken off some bolts, we've loosened up some tie rod ends, took the steering stabilizer out of the way, so we're going to get the drag link out of the way first. A good trick for popping these tapered tie rod ends out of their holes is just to give it a good whack right here. The tape will force the bolt right out of the hole. Okay, what I'm measuring is the center to center on these tie rod end studs. So the center to center would be the same as to say left edge of that stud to the left edge of this stud. Keep the tape measure nice and straight. 58 and 3/8. Stock parts. All of our disassembly is complete. I've removed the factory tie rod, the factory drag link. I've disconnected the sway bar links from the axle side. I've disconnected the track bar from the axle side. Save these sway bar link bolts because you're going to need them again later. So we've installed our new 3-inch adjustable bump stop spacers. We've got them set to 3 inches for this kit. While we were at it, while we had the springs out, we put in some new Iron Rock 2.5-inch springs. Next up, we are installing our track bar bracket. Goes right in front of the existing bracket. The spacer sleeve goes inside. 2 3/8 bolts go in these holes here. We put in our U-bolt. Little sleeve goes right between the factory sway bar link bolt. Now your sway bar link will attach in the new hole here using your existing factory bolt. Track bar goes back in, new bolt, washer. Next up is our sway bar link relocation bracket. We're going to put a new bolt in the washer, put the sleeve on the bolt, drop it right into the factory hole. U-bolt from the back side, sway bar link attaches using your factory bolt and nut. And now we're ready to tighten all of these bolts. We've tightened all our bolts, we've tightened all our bracket bolts, tightened up the sway bar link bolts. Now the track bar, because it's a rubber bushing, we want to tighten that bolt at ride height so that the rubber bushing is at rest when you're at ride height. So what we've done, we've lowered it down on the hoist, got as close to ride height as we could, and we're going to tighten up this bolt. Now we'll come back in with a torque wrench, torque it properly. Next up, we're going to install our steering stabilizer relocation bracket. So the first step is to cut and remove this zip tie right here because it's right in the way of where our U-bolt needs to go. So make sure you pull it all the way out of the way. I've already loosened the sway bar bolts on that side just a little bit. Now I'm going to remove these sway bar bolts. Before I slide this bracket into place, I'm going to insert this zip tie through the little zip tie holes. A little bit easier to do that now. Angle the sway bar bracket in place. I'll leave those loose. Now before I put this U-bolt in, there's a brake line that runs right along the top of this cross member. On some Jeeps it's in the way and on some Jeeps it's not. So make darn sure you don't pinch that underneath your U-bolt. Alright, all my bolts are in. I'm ready to tighten them up. I'm going to go ahead and zip tie this wire to its new home. That'll keep it safely out of the way of the steering stabilizer. Next up is our sway bar spacer for the driver's side. Squeeze the plate in there. We're going to assemble the drag link. That is the shorter of the two bars, and it uses the heim joint with the larger hole. I'm going to thread this one on the bent side, thread this one in all the way, and then back it out 3 turns. And thread this one in all the way. The heim joints are right-hand thread. The other side of the double adjuster, the male side, is a left-hand thread. Now before you thread these together, you want to put these clamps on. I'm going to put all 3 of them on here. One is for the steering stabilizer, one will clamp the drag link, and one will clamp the double adjuster. Now I'm going to thread this in all the way as a starting point. So when it comes time to adjust this thing, this one just stays right where you put it, and then all of your adjustment is done with the double adjuster here. That's why we want to make very certain that these are adjusted equally. When you start, this has a left-hand thread on one side, right-hand thread on the other. So as long as they're equal when you start, they'll always stay equal. Okay, I put some bolts in with washers and all the clamps. So this one's for the steering stabilizer, so it gets the long bolt. For now, we're going to use the short bolt out of the steering stabilizer hardware, and we're just going to snug this thing up just to keep it from sliding around on us. Since our heim joints mount on top of these surfaces were never really meant to have something mounted to them, so they weren't perfectly flat from the factory. So we're just going to file them down nice and perfectly flat. The top of both of the tie rod mounting surfaces, the top of the drag link mounting surface, and the bottom of the pitman arm. Alright, time to install the drag link. We're going to use this hex bolt with the hole drilled for the cotter pin with the washer on it. Next, this tapered sleeve goes in. Next, the drag link with the misalignment washers installed. And the castle nut. Fancy tapered bolt drilled for a cotter pin. From the bottom up, misalignment washers are already installed. And a castle nut. Okay, for the tie rod, we're going to use the heim joints with the smaller hole. Larger hole are both for the drag link. Smaller hole are for the tie rod. The tie rod is the larger and longer of the 2 bars. Thread it in all the way. Back it out half, 1, half, 2, half, 3 turns, just as a starting point. And then we'll use the measurement that we took earlier and we'll adjust it to that same measurement. I've centered up the balls in the heim joints so they're as parallel as possible. I've already adjusted it 58 3/8, center to center. That's the same measurement that we took off the stock tie rod. Okay, drop in these M6 clamping bolts. They use a nice big 5mm Allen wrench. I'm actually going to set this nice and level and snug these up a little bit. It'll just make it a little easier to work on. For the tie rod, we're going to use these cool tapered bolts, again with the hole in them for the cotter pin. Here. It's nice to have a little bit of help for this part. One washer below and then one washer above. We're going to torque down all of our tie rod and drag link bolts. As you torque it down, you'll see that this tapered bolt gets drawn into the knuckle, and it'll draw it in until it's flush. You don't want to use an impact wrench on these, just torque them down by hand. The key thing here is have this heim joint rotated all the way down, just like you see here, and have this pinch bolt perfectly horizontal. These tabs should be perfectly vertical. That way this bend comes down to clear the frame, forward to clear the sway bar links and the bolts. Next step is to set the toe in. Iron Rock makes these cool new alignment tools that just make the job so much easier and a little more accurate, and that's what we're going to do on this rig. So we've got about an 1/8 inch of toe in, and we really want to be at 1/32 toe in. So we're going to adjust the tie rod just a little bit longer. Adjust it out about 1 turn. That should get us really close. Exactly where we want to be. Okay, we've got our steering wheel centered just about where you want it. The way you do that is by turning this double adjuster here. So you just turn the double adjuster, hold the drag link steady, turn it. When you're done, make sure these bolts are nice and perfectly vertical. If you have them rotated down at all, they can hit stuff. If you have them rotated too high, they can hit stuff. So make sure they're nice and perfectly vertical. That's very important. And tighten them up just good and snug. And we may need to adjust it a little bit after our test drive. Okay, so we're on a short test drive. We're looking for a nice, perfectly straight stretch of road. And we're going to just check if the steering wheel is centered or not. Make a mental note of exactly where the steering wheel is sitting. And then when we get back to the shop, we'll position the steering wheel in the exact same spot and adjust it until it's nice and centered. We're back from our test drive. The steering wheel was just a little bit off. We've adjusted it to where we want it. Now for our final adjustment, make sure this heim joint is rolled all the way down. I'm just going to put my wrench on it, pull it all the way down against the stop. So right here, it's all the way down. The one on the other side is also all the way down. That way, again, they share the load as this thing pivots a little bit. Next, we're going to steer it all the way to the right and install our steering stabilizer. Okay, we were temporarily using this short bolt just to hold this clamp in place so it didn't rattle around during our test drive. This is the bolt I'm going to use to bolt the steering stabilizer into our bracket on the top side. We're just reusing this stabilizer to show you that large body steering stabilizers do fit with this kit. Iron Rock sells a really nice stabilizer that has zero free play in it. It's a really nice unit. So I'm going to compress the stabilizer all the way, back it out 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to set this bolt perfectly horizontal. And then we're going to test the steering. We're going to cycle the steering full lock in both directions and make sure that the steering stabilizer is not limiting our steering travel. Our steering stabilizer is installed. Now I'm going to cycle the steering back and forth. We've got the weight of the vehicle on the jack stands, so it's basically at ride height or pretty close to it. So we're going to cycle it back and forth. Full lock steering, you can see there's a little bit of the shaft exposed, so we know it's not limiting our travel. We've reached the steering stop here, so we know the steering stabilizer is not limiting our travel in either direction. Our installation's all wrapped up. All of our cotter pins are installed. Our toe in is set. Our steering is centered. Steering stabilizer is installed. Just some key points to remember. Make sure these bolts are nice and vertical, straight up and down, just like you see in the video. Make sure your heim joints are all rolled forward so that both heims together are supporting the weight of the tie rod and the drag link. That's going to keep them from coming loose. Other than that, we've gained a lot of ground clearance, Steering stabilizer is way up out of the way. Remember, it used to be way down here below the axle. Now it's way up here out of the way. Our steering has moved up quite a ways. Everything's very heavy duty and all brand new parts.